Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Fantasy Birds. Today, we have a very special episode. It's our 2022 NFL mock draft, full round, all 32 picks. We're going through it, no trades from pick 1 through 32, predicting what we think is going to happen in the NFL draft. Not necessarily what we will do, but what we predict will happen. So let's get it started off with number 1, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Draft. Last year, they got their stud quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. This year, we're going to go Aiden Hutchinson, the edge rusher out of Michigan. Very consensus pick, very safe pick. There are some other talented edge rushers that could potentially get to number 1 in the draft. Not necessarily a for-sure pick, but Aiden Hutchinson, very safe and still has room to grow for that Jacksonville defense. Where they need some edge pressure, Caleb Chason hasn't really panned out to what they expected him to be. Need to get some help for Josh Allen on the edge. Aiden Hutchinson is going to be our pick at number 1 for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Number 2 overall is arguably one of I'd say the most difficult picks if you're not counting trades or anything like that. The Lions could go many different directions here. Quarterback is an option here with Malik Willis. I personally believe that they're going to go after an edge rusher. Positional value is, favors positions like quarterback, edge rusher, and offensive tackle. And there are plenty of edge rushers and offensive tackles in this draft. Drafted Penei Sewell last year with Taylor Decker on the bookend side. I don't think they need a tackle here. The difficult decision was going between Kayvon Thibodeau and Travon Walker. I just feel like Travon Walker has gotten a lot of draft buzz recently. He's the guy that's surging up draft boards late, kind of like we saw with Jamin Davis last year, the linebacker out of Kentucky, who went mid-first round when no one was expecting him to go that high. People had Travon Walker in the first round, but I still think this meteoric rise, he's got the elite physical tools. He's got the character traits that Dan Campbell will want. He's a defensive guy. I mean, ultimately he coached tight ends in New Orleans, but let's be real. Dan Campbell likes him some athletic guys on his offensive and defensive line. I think they're going to go Travon Walker here, edge out of Georgia, although they could go multiple ways with this pick.
Houston Texans with the 3rd overall pick. This is one of the couple teams at the top of the draft that have holes at almost every single position on their team. So you can really go anywhere on this lineup. I'm going to go with Ikem Ekwonu, the tackle out of NC State. I feel as though Davis Mills, the quarterback, they saw some things they liked out of him. They don't need to push for a quarterback and draft him Malik Willis. They want to, if you're going to see if Davis Mills is the real deal, you got to get him some help on the outside and on the offensive line. Laramie Tunsil, a good player for them. You throw in Ikem Ekwonu, really bolsters that offensive line for that team. I think they could go on the defensive line if Travon Walker is there, just because his upside is absolutely insane. There is a player there. I think they could take Evan Neal also. They have their pick attack, but Ikem Ekwonu, the offensive tackle that I like, number 1 in the draft. So I'm going to give him to the Houston Texans, trying to bolster that line and give Davis Mills at least a fighting chance going into his second year to see what he can do for that team.
Moving on to the Jets at number 4. Again, this is another team that needs edge rushers. Again, if you need an edge rusher and you're at the top of the draft this year, you're looking like you're in good shape. Kayvon Thibodeau falls to number 4. Arguably came into this year as the consensus number 1 overall pick, and he dropped a little bit. Sat out for a lot of the year, kind of nursed some injuries, kind of did what I think, Derek Stingley might have done, which, try to preserve your status as a first round pick, don't get injured. And that might rub some people the wrong way. And I think Kayvon Thibodeau has been a guy that's been on the scene with his elite physical tools and production ever since his freshman year. And he's just one of those guys that I think you get prospect fatigue. I think you get prospect fatigue of hearing Kayvon Thibodeau's name for so long that eventually you start to nitpick these guys who have been in the limelight for so long. I think this is a slam dunk pick here for the Jets. Obviously, they could use offensive tackle to help out with Zach Wilson and that new offense. But again, they haven't had a consistent edge rusher since John Abraham, and it's been a long time since then. So Kayvon Thibodeau gives them a consistent edge rusher. Get him with Sebastian Joseph Day and Quentin Williams on the defensive line. Now they're starting to build the foundation of a defense. Still need a lot more stuff to help them out. But I think you bring in Robert Saleh. bring in a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau here, the 4th overall pick. This is a good way to help revitalize that defense for the Jets.
Next football team in the state of New York, we're going to go with the New York Giants at pick 5. Really like an edge rusher for this team at 5. However, with Trevon Walker, Thibodeau, and Hutchinson off the board, I think they might look to go offensive tackle here. Evan Neal out of Alabama. Him and Iquanu right there, 1A, 1B on who you think the best tackle is. Daniel Jones, this is the last straw for Daniel Jones. If the Giants find themselves in another position where they're drafting at the top of the draft, they probably look to go quarterback next year. Giants put some pieces around on the outside. Kadarius Toney, Galladay, got some good wide receivers. Obviously, they have a great running back in Saquon Barkley. You have a great offensive line piece right here in Neal. If you can add that for Daniel Jones, if he can't perform this year, it's time to throw it away for Daniel Jones, career backup, if he can't get it done. So let's get that offensive line going for the New York Giants with Evan Neal out of Alabama at number 5.
Now, this is finally where Malik Willis will come off the board. Usually we see quarterback inflation. This is one of those years where you don't really know where the quarterbacks are going to go. No one's really fallen in love with many of these quarterbacks, but I feel like at this point in the draft, Malik Willis is the only guy that's been able to cement himself as a real potential top 10 pick, to the point where I don't really see him falling outside of the top 10 at this point. I think with his physical tools, he's obviously got the ability to scramble and gain some yards on the ground, but it's not just gaining yards on the ground. You look at his movement inside and outside the pocket. This is a guy that's rolling to his right, has a defender coming at him, and as he's getting hit, uncourts a 40-yard pass down the field that only he could make. He's got that type of physical upside. He's got the character to go with it. We'll see if he can continue to develop as a processor of the game. But I still think that he is the type of physical talent and the type of leader that someone like the Panthers could need, because they have the receivers over there in Carolina. They don't have the quarterback. Sam Darnold is not the guy. But a good receiving stable between Christian McCaffrey catching those passes out of the backfield, and then Terrace Marshall, DJ Moore, and Robbie Anderson. You've got the receivers to throw to. Whether or not Malik Willis takes the job day one, I could see this being the pick here. And I will say I did ponder taking an offensive tackle here, just because ever since Jordan Gross retired in 2013, the Panthers have had a different starting left tackle every single year. So even though they got Malik Willis here and as their QB of the future, I still feel like they need to upgrade at offensive tackle as well.
New York Giants, second pick in the top 10. We're going to go with the cornerback out of Cincinnati, Sauce Gardner. Led that team to the bowl appearance against Alabama, where it might have gotten away, but they ended up making it into the college football playoffs. So respect there. Gardner really the top cornerback in this draft. He's really separated himself from a Derek Stingley. And New York Giants, let's look at their team. So that you add the piece in Evan Neal at number 5, we believe. The offense looks pretty solid if Daniel Jones is there, able to play well for that team, I should say. But edge rusher, a big concern. I'm not really looking to go get down an edge rusher now that those top guys we talked about gone off the board. Bradbury could be a cap casualty for this New York Giants team in the future. He's played very well for this team, but they need a dynamic cornerback to go alongside him or replace him if he's inevitably going to leave the football team. We look at that NFC East, very, very poor team, but they are very solid at wide receiver. CeeDee Lamb, Terry McLaurin, Devontae Smith, potentially adding more pieces to that team, to those teams on the outside. So you're going to need a cornerback to compete in these NFC East, as the wide receiver position is loaded for almost every single team. And we think Sauce Gardner is easily the best corner in this draft, and we're going to give him to the New York Giants at pick number 7.
Hunter, where are football games won?
In the trenches.
And good teams invest in the trenches and build their way out. But that's not what the Falcons are going to do here. You already know the Falcons are a team that likes to go with perimeter options, both offensively and defensively. They invested the 4th overall pick in Kyle Pitts, which, look, don't get me wrong, Kyle Pitts, all-pro football player. I truly believe he's going to be one of the best tight ends in the NFL for a long time. But they built their offense around Julio Jones, around guys like Roddy White and Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage. They've always had a deep stable of receivers for them to go to tight ends. Austin Hooper had really productive years. But what have we known about the Falcons? They've always struggled on the line. Outside of Grady Jarrett on their defensive line, the last 5 years, who have they had? They really haven't had anything. They had one good year with Vic Beasley. That pick kind of flamed out. They've needed an edge rusher for a long time, and unfortunately for the Falcons, the board's not going to quite fall to them the way that they want. If they want to maybe snag an elite talent like a Kayvon Thibodeau, don't think he's going to fall that far. Again, Jermaine Johnson, the edge rusher out of Florida State, was an option here, but I still think the Falcons are going to be that one team that really falls in love with the wide receiver in the first round, especially in the top 10. That's what they do. They like to build their team on the perimeter and try to win with elite talent on the outside.
Let's head to pick number 9 with the Seattle Seahawks, trading away their quarterback, Russell Wilson, to the Denver Broncos. This team is in desperate need of help all across the board. Easily the worst team in that division. I think this team is definitely in one of the prime positions for a trade back spot. But like I said, we're not going to try to predict something out of our league. If anyone's trying to predict trades, they really don't have too much information if they're not inside that general manager huddle discussing draft plans. So we're not going to trade back, but I do think this is a prime position for the Seahawks to trade back and acquire more picks, as they really do need a lot of players going forward. But at this number 9 spot, we're going to go with Jermaine Johnson, the edge rusher that you just talked about out of Florida State. Really losing Bobby Wagner on that defense. It was already looking terrible. It's in shambles right now. Pete Carroll, defensive coach, he needs the pressure to the quarterback, especially with Kyler Murray, Matt Stafford in that division, and even Trey Lance, upcoming potential prospect there. So we're going to go with the edge rusher. And I know the New York Jets would love to have him on the board at number 10, but we're going to give the Seattle Seahawks the guy out of Florida State at number 9.
I got to say, it's very easy to get caught up in positional value, but sometimes it's easy to get too bogged down into that. The goal of the draft is to draft good football players, and that's what the Jets are going to do here at number 10. Kyle Hamilton, arguably, some might argue he's the best football player in the draft. He can play any position, any safety position in the secondary, free and strong. He'd be a great nickel hybrid defender if you want to use him that way. He's a great tackler, great instincts. His 40 time left a lot to be desired. I think teams were looking for a guy like him to explode out of the combine and, running a 4.53, which, by the way, a 4.53 is a pretty damn good time. But again, that just goes to show the expectations for a guy like Kyle Hamilton are so high that might cause them to slip a little bit. Maybe teams get too, locked up into traditional positional value. But the Jets at number 10 with their second pick in the first round, getting arguably the best football player in the entire draft, I think that's a steal here for the Jets.
All right, moving outside the top 10, we have the Washington now Commanders. We're going to go with Derek Stingley, the quarterback from LSU. We talked about it earlier with the Giants taking a cornerback. This division is loaded on the outside. There were doubts in my mind. Could they go for a wide receiver here with Terry McLaurin's contract being up in the air? Diami Brown, Curtis Samuel, they have some weapons on the outside, but I think they could look to go Jameson Williams here or even a Garrett Wilson if he were to fall. But we're going the cornerback out of LSU. Could have been a top 5 pick if he came out 3 years ago. However, we know after the national championship, a couple injuries played into it. A couple decided to sit out due to preserve his NFL draft status. But his rookie year, best cornerback in the entire nation, day one as a freshman. Interceptions off the charts for that team. Derek Stingley has the ability to be a lockdown cornerback in the National Football League. Definitely some risk there. But at number 11, if you have the option to get a cornerstone cornerback for the future, you have to take it here for the Commanders. I like this pick for Ron Rivera's team.
Number 12, got to admit, the Minnesota Vikings are one of the more difficult teams to kind of figure out. They've wanted an interior defensive lineman for a long time. You have an elite receiver with Justin Jefferson, that duo between Thielen and Jefferson. However, you look at cornerback, is the 12th overall pick too early for a guy like Andrew Booth? I don't think it is, but think back to when, the last few years when the Minnesota Vikings were at their best. they had a defensive line that was really good, and they could stop the run, get after the passer, and that's what they're going to do here. Defensive lineman. I'm actually going with a defensive lineman out of Georgia, but not Jordan Davis. Looking for more of a pass rusher here in Devontae Wyatt out of Georgia. Again, great physical tools. This defense is just absolutely loaded. And you'll probably see more of these guys come off the board later in the first round. But man, this defense was loaded. Devontae Wyatt, penetrating defensive tackle, good physical tools. This is a good pick, I think, for the Minnesota Vikings. And if you think his name might be called a little bit too early, I think NFL teams would disagree with you.
All right, let's head back to the Houston Texans. Grab their offensive tackle, Kwanu, at number 3 overall. Now we're going to give Davis Mills some more help. We're going to go Drake London, the wide receiver out of USC. I could see Drake London's pick dropping in the draft due to his lack of ability to separate. However, just a great go up and get the ball out of the air kind of guy. Texans haven't really had that alpha wide receiver since they traded DeAndre Hopkins for the last leg of David Johnson and a pick. But Brandon Cooks just re-signed with the team. He could be traded coming into the next couple of years. But Drake London, alpha wide receiver, there are the concerns about the separation I talked about, but you got to give Davis Mills some help. And Drake London has the ability to be an elite wide receiver in the National Football League. So we're going to go Drake London for the Houston Texans.
Ultimately, this pick came down to 2 guys with the board the way that it is right here. Andrew Booth, the cornerback from Clemson. I mentioned him at pick 12. I'll mention him again at pick 14. He's another guy that I was really considering here. However, the Ravens are a team that likes to run the football, and despite having that elite running threat at Lamar Jackson is, despite having a deep stable of running backs who all unfortunately got injured last year, with J.K. Dobbins and all of them, you need a guy that can actually help block for them. Their offensive line is not as good as you would think. And again, another shout out to another former Last Chance U alum in Tyree Phillips at left guard. I still think you can find an upgrade over him. And I think simply put, Zion Johnson is the best interior offensive lineman in this draft. He's a guard. He can play either spot on the offensive line. He can even swing out to tackle if you need him to. His best reps were at guard. I think if you put him at left guard in this Ravens offense, I think that's where you'll probably get the most out of him. But a team that likes to run the football, give him the best interior offensive lineman in the draft, ship it, FedEx it.
Okay, Eagles. We're going to go with Jordan Davis, the interior defensive lineman from Georgia. Absolute massive behemoth of a human being right here for the Georgia Bulldogs. Fletcher Cox, elite pass rusher for this team for many, many years, but he's on his last legs in the NFL. They want to see that heir apparent on the defensive line. Philadelphia Eagles are well known for their defense and offensive lines in the past couple of years, and this guy is going to continue to burn offensive lines just like Fletcher Cox has for the majority of his career. I was thinking about a wide receiver here in Jameson Williams, but with how deep the wide receiver is in this class, we decided to go with the defensive lineman for the Philadelphia Eagles right here for this pick. Next are the New Orleans Saints. Who do you have going down to New Orleans?
The Houdats, they're very special to my heart. They're my favorite team from the state of Louisiana. We love to see it. And we also love to see the way this mock has turned out for them. Because if you are a Saints fan, I feel like this has got to be the dream scenario for you. You lose a guy like Teron Armstead, who's been your franchise left tackle, an elite left tackle for almost the entire last decade. I believe 2013 was his first year. So for the last decade, you've had an elite offensive lineman with elite physical tools, elite pass protector in Teron Armstead, and you're getting another guy in Charles Cross that is also a great pass protector coming out of Mississippi State. Played in that air raid Mike Leach offense, had plenty of reps to see him as a pass blocker. He can handle both quickness and strength off the edge. Needs to get a little bit stronger, but I think with his physical tools and his dominance as a pass blocker in college, I think this is a dream fit for a Saints team that wants to keep Jameis Winston upright if they're going to give him a shot to secure the long-term quarterback job, as he tore his ACL last year. Again, this is a home run pick if you're the Saints. You take the best best player available and at a position of need for them, I think this is a home run pick for the Saints.
Right after the Saints, we're going to go with the Los Angeles Chargers. I really wanted to go interior defensive line, one of those big guys out of Georgia. However, both off the board. So we're going to look at the offensive line. We're going to go Trevor Penning, offensive tackle. They just drafted Rashawn Slater last year. He played excellent for that team. Got the center out of Green Bay, Lindsley. So this offensive line, already a good unit. Trevor Penning could make it an elite unit. The defensive line is stacked. Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa. They get the cornerback in free agency. If you're able to pair Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, and Justin Herbert with an elite offensive line, this team could be a Super Bowl team, even in the loaded AFC West. So we're going to go Trevor Penning on the offensive tackle to keep Justin Herbert upright and to keep this team in the AFC Championship window.
Despite the ACL tear, despite the fact that this would be the third time in the last 3 years that the Eagles would have drafted a receiver in the first round, I still think Jameson Williams gives you that threat that the Eagles need. Put him opposite Devontae Smith, maybe even try to work Jalen Reagor on the field. Hasn't really worked out as a first round pick for him, taking him over Justin Jefferson a couple of years ago out of TCU. But again, you have 3 first round picks at that position. You can use that, spread the offense out, create run lanes for Jalen Hurts. Now you've got Miles Sanders, an electric playmaker out of the backfield. This gives them options on offense. And frankly, I find it very likely that the Eagles will use one of these 3 picks, or one of their 2 first round picks, on a wide receiver. So it could be Jameson Williams. I don't see him falling this far in the draft. If he doesn't, it'll probably be another guy. There are plenty of receivers in this first round for them to take. And that's why I think they're ultimately going to go with an elite playmaker receiver. Who you got for the Hoodats at 19?
New Orleans Saints back on the clock at number 19. Get the trade with the Philadelphia Eagles to acquire a second first-round pick. Original pick right here for the Saints. This is a dream situation if you're a New Orleans Saints fan. You get the offensive tackle a couple picks earlier, and Chris Olave drops to you right here. Maybe one of the more pro-ready wide receivers in this draft. Definitely one of the top 5 wide receivers, must-have prospects here. You can get this guy alongside Michael Thomas, 2 Ohio State wide receivers, with your offensive line established, losing Toronto upset, grabbing the first-round pick here. This team is right there for a wild card position. Maybe not good enough to compete with Tampa Bay for the division lead, but definitely one of those wild cards for the New Orleans Saints, especially in a weakened NFC now that Russell Wilson and other players are in the AFC. So the Saints are right back in that playoff hunt with a Chris Olave and a potential offensive tackle here. If you're a New Orleans Saints fan, this would be an AA+ ending for the first round of the NFL draft. So no brainer here for me. Chris Olave, wide receiver, Ohio State.
And not to mention that, but they complement each other so well between Olave and his downfield, his smoothness on deep routes, his ability to run after the catch. And you combine that with Michael Thomas, who's more of a physical down, within 10 yards, slant routes, in routes. I mean, Michael Thomas and Chris Olave would be a dynamic receiver duo for the Saints. Here's Andrew Booth. I've been liking this guy for multiple picks, and I finally find a team that could really use his services. There's a few different directions here the Pittsburgh Steelers could have gone. Quarterback between Rudolph and Mitchell Trubisky, that is not settled yet. So quarterback could be an option here, but it actually wouldn't have been Kenny Pickett that I would have gone. If anything, I feel like Desmond Ridder would have been more of an interesting option here for the Steelers. But I didn't go either of them. They need interior offensive line. Maybe you can get Kenyon Green. This would be a decent time to get him. But with Zion Johnson off the board to a division rival, I don't think you want to force an interior offensive line pick, and you can get a good one on day 2. Andrew Booth is a guy at Clemson. Again, elite physical tools. He's got, he's 6'2". He's got the length. He's got the physical tools. Some questions about his health. But again, This guy's a really good football player. I think he's a bona fide first round talent. I think he's solidly cornerback 3. I think there's a tier 1 of three corners between Sauce, Derek Stingley Jr., and Andrew Booth. I think those are the top 3, at least in my tier 1. And then, you can arrange those guys however you want. But I think the Steelers have a tendency to grab guys who have elite physical tools in the first round that don't necessarily know how to play football. Well, luckily for them, they were able to get a guy at pick 20 that actually does have coverage skills. So I think Andrew Booth would be an incredible pick here for the Steelers.
Let's go to our next team. It's going to be the New England Patriots. Look, it's pretty evident the New England Patriots cannot retain cornerbacks. Stephon Gilmore, gone. J.C. Jackson, gone. Who are they going to replace him with?
Oh.
Trent McDuffie, cornerback for Washington. Obviously a team need. Coach Bill Belichick, defensive minded coach, needs his cornerbacks to play aggressively for this unit. Trent McDuffie going to have to substitute in for those lost cornerbacks that they've had in the past and not willing to pay those cornerbacks. Trent McDuffie, a much cheaper option for this team. Hopefully he can play just as well as those two guys for Bill Belichick and the New England Patriot fans.
Pick 22. I question whether or not I would actually go with a receiver in the first round for Green Bay, or at least for their first pick, simply because this is a team that we've expected to draft a receiver in the first round for years, and then they pick Jordan Love, and then they pick other guys that you think they need a receiver, and then they go another direction and try to get by with guys like Marquez Valdez-Scantling. No more of that. I think now that you've gotten rid of Devontae Adams, you have an elite quarterback at the tail end of his prime. You've got to get him some weapons. And Treylon Burks would be so much fun with the Green Bay Packers. You can line him up anywhere. He wins in different ways. You can throw it to him behind the line of scrimmage. And at 6'3", 225 pounds, this dude is a Mack truck that runs with 4.4 speed. He can win again behind the line of scrimmage after the catch. He's won vertically. I do question whether or not he can be a traditional, receiver with a full route tree. But again, you get an offensive coordinator and a head coach like Matt LaFleur who can get creative, find ways to use them. Think of Treylon Burks as a bigger Deebo Samuel. Like, that's the type of role you would want here. And I think, the play action game would work really well for his skill set. Get him on drag routes, get him against smaller slot cornerbacks, and let him go to work. He's got the same speed, much bigger size. I'm a big fan of Treylon Burks, as you can tell. I think he'd be a really good fit for the Packers here at 22, especially because with the Cowboys picking at 24, if you pass up on Burks now, I don't think he gets back to you at 28.
Good point there. I like the Jerry Jones Arkansas connection. But let's move on to Arizona Cardinals, losing Chandler Jones in free agency to the Las Vegas Raiders. Got to fill that position. Also needs on the offensive line to protect Kyler Murray. Been injured, banged up a little bit the last couple of years. But we're going to go with George Karlaftis, the edge rusher from Purdue, just to fill that need that Chandler Jones, such a dominant player for that team last year, really a big part in how we're a 8-0, 9-0 team, and then they kind of collapsed at the end of the season. J.J. Watt injured, he's coming back, but you got to get that edge of pressure that Chandler Jones was able to bring for the team. We're going to go George Karlaftis, the edge man out of Purdue, Big Ten guy on the outside that we think can help pressure the quarterbacks in that NFC West division.
Yeah, don't get it fooled. Don't let the pigment fool you. This guy's an elite athlete. Now, at 24, Dallas Cowboys, again, edge rusher would have been great here. I actually would have picked Karlaftis if Treylon Burks wasn't there. I would have picked Karlaftis if he had been there. Of course, he goes to pick 23 for the Arizona Cardinals. So that leaves them with some interesting options, especially in the secondary. Kyer Elam, the cornerback, is still on the board. However, you have a cornerback that you like in Trevon Diggs. So your traditional boundary corner, I don't think you necessarily need that. Obviously losing Randy Gregory, you want that pass rusher, but I don't think you can get immediate immediate help the way you want to. I think it would be reaching for a guy like Boye Mafe. I think Ojabo, again, is definitely worth the value, but the Cowboys are a team that's trying to contend, and I don't think you're going to get anything out of Ojabo in year one, which is what they would want. So Lewis Cine is a guy that has great film. He flies to the football. You know, he reminds me a lot of Jamal Adams, just in that this guy actually has coverage skills. But on top of that, when he hits you, the running back's running downfield. When he hits you at that angle, that running back stops in his tracks. He is an amazing tackler. He has great physical tools. He runs across the field, sideline to sideline. He's very agile, very mobile, and he's got versatility. You can line him up deep. You can line him up in the box, and he'll make a difference for you either way, both with his range and his physicality. So I think Lewis Cine is a really good football player. Yet another Georgia Bulldog defensive player to go here in the first round at 24 to the Dallas Cowboys.
Next on the clock, the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills nearly made it to the AFC Championship game, but they choked it late against the Kansas City Chiefs and in overtime. Tre'Davious White, a big part of that team, not able to play due to injury, so we're going to help him out with Kaiir Elam out of Florida, the cornerback, if he's able to stay healthy. Definitely one of the top cornerback prospects in this draft. We think he's going to be able to alleviate some of that pressure on Tre'Davious White and really help an AFC East division that's sneakily becoming better and better at the wide receiver position. Miami Dolphins with Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, an elite unit over there. New England still suffering, but New York Jets have Corey Davis and potentially adding a wide receiver in the top 10 of this draft. So we think Elam definitely a position of need for the Buffalo Bills. They addressed their edge pressure in the last year's draft. Cornerback, the last bowling pin to fall for this team if they are able to make a Super Bowl push, maybe even a running back. But we're going to go with Kaiir Elam right here, cornerback out of Florida.
I like Elam a lot. I also like Nakobe Dean. Yep, we're going with another Georgia defensive player here. Look, I think this is ultimately a comfortable spot where Dean's going to go. You want a little bit more size out of him, at only about 220 pounds. You want a guy that can shore up against the run a little bit better. But again, this is a team that you can give him a guy like Nakobe Dean. He can come in and be the heart and soul of your defense. Not to mention he's got the range, sideline to sideline ability. And, he's the guy that's going to be making all the calls for them. He's a very smart football player. He's really good in coverage, which nowadays you need to be able to cover as a linebacker, especially in the AFC. With all those playmakers, you're probably going to run into the Chiefs or someone like that in the playoffs. Got to be able to cover their backfield options and tight ends. So I'll go with Nakobe Dean here. Now they lose, especially since they lose a guy like Rashaan Evans to the Falcons, their first round pick from a few years ago. They have a hole at linebacker. I think this plugs up that hole quite nicely.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers getting their quarterback Tom Brady back. You'll lose an offensive guard in the offseason. You pick one up in Kenyon Green from Texas A&M. If they're not to go offensive line here, I believe they're going to address that secondary, as that front seven is absolutely elite, one of the top bunches in the entire NFL. Wide receiver, they're solid. Running back, Leonard Fournette. Could look to add one later in the draft, but it's either going to be secondary or offensive line here. And we're going to go with Kenyon Green, the guard from Texas A&M. Has tackle flexibility, but he will play guard for this team if they are to draft him. We like him out of the SEC, filling up a needed hole on this unit.
Yeah, the Green Bay Packers cutting Preston Smith this offseason. They need edge help. And look, David Ojabo is not going to be able to help them much year one. Torn Achilles, is going to be out. However, you're not going to bank on anything from him year one. If he comes back later on in the season for the playoffs, great, fantastic. But ultimately, in a stacked edge class, even in a stacked edge class, this is a guy that was a potential top 10 pick before his Achilles injury. And I really hate that for him, because he would have been an absolute lock as a top 10 pick if you talk about the physical tools that they look for in the NFL. He has the measurables, he has all of that, and he had a lot of opportunities on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson. loaded Michigan defense. And I think for the future, this is a nice gamble pick for the Green Bay Packers. Get an elite edge defender. They've already got another guy with physical tools and Rashawn Gary. Uh, I think this is a good value for David Ojabo. I think this will be a steal, and I think this is going to remind me a lot of what the Titans did a few years ago with Jeffrey Simmons. Remember, Jeffrey Simmons was, arguably the top interior defensive lineman in the draft. Tears his ACL a couple weeks before the draft, just like Ojabo did with his Achilles, and he falls to the end of the first round. Titans scoop him up, and now they've got an all-pro player on their hands, and so. The Titans got a good value. The Green Bay Packers are going to try to follow that mold here.
Kansas City Chiefs back-to-back picks here. We're going to keep it simple. You lose Tyrann Mathieu in the offseason free agency, so you're going to add a Daxton Hill, safety out of Michigan. You just talked about how elite that Michigan defense was, make it to the college football playoffs where they inevitably got blown out by Georgia. And that defense, Michigan defense, pretty stout. We're going to keep the safety from Michigan and sub him in for Tyrann Mathieu here for the Kansas City Chiefs.
One of the best safeties in the draft. I think is good value for them. Also, speaking of good value, Kansas City, another team that traded an elite receiver for another first-round pick. Jahan Dotson, the wide receiver from Penn State, I think is the best receiver on the board, and frankly, is the only other receiver that I for sure would take in the first round. I also really like George Pickens out of Georgia, but Jahan Dotson, coming into the season, I really enjoyed his improvement. Coming into the season, all he really was a guy, again, really athletic. Like they always churn out elite athletes out of Penn State. But he was a guy that won contested catches, and he was only 5'11". And I felt like that wouldn't really translate to the NFL. But this past year, he did really well for himself in terms of getting separation. He ran a really diverse route tree. He's a very fluid guy. I think this is a very good pick here for Kansas City at 30, considering they don't really have anybody at receiver, outside of Nicole Hardman and Marquez Valdez-Scantling in free agency. I really like this pick. It's also losing Marcus Robinson, by the way. That's more of a reason for them to pick Jahan Dotson here.
Cincinnati Bengals, one game away from winning a Super Bowl championship. Clear hole in the team was the offensive line. They addressed it in free agency, picking up a couple solid players to fill those holes. We're going to give another one, Tyler Linderbaum out of Iowa. Colin Cowherd's favorite player in the draft. Can't miss prospect for him. Very, very good player, center for this team. Also could look to go cornerback, as Eli Apple is a gaping hole in that unit as well. So if they're not going to go secondary, we think offensive line going to plug that in and just beat the dead horse that is Cincinnati. Needs to improve their offensive line. They've already done in the offseason. We think they're going to keep doing it in this draft with the second to last pick in the first round.
I like that a lot. Really shore up that offensive line and kind of plug up that last hole. Move Ted Karras over to guard. Get arguably the best center in the draft here. I like that a lot. Now, Kenny Pickett at 32. Again, the Lions, I debated giving them Malik Willis at the number 2 overall pick. This is a team that they seem okay with running it back with Jared Goff for another year. I wouldn't be surprised. However, you have 2 first-round picks here. Again, if Jahan Dotson or any of the other first-round picks at receiver were available, I really would have heavily considered them here because they do need receivers. They also need safeties, but with both Lewis Cine and Daxton Hill both also gone, I feel like the board kind of lends itself to throw a dart at the QB position. You want to see if Pickett can be that guy. Teams like him, but I feel like he's one of those guys that could fall late in the first round. Obviously, teams like to freak out about hand size. His hands are very small. But again, this is a guy that I think. It's true. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true. They really care about that type of stuff. So again, I think you got to throw darts here at pick 32. You get that 5th-year option if you like Kenny Pickett enough. You get him on that rookie scale contract. I think Kenny Pickett. Why not throw the dart? Besides, I think he's going to be a first-round pick anyway.
Yeah, some teams probably going to end up trading up to get him, but we're not going to try to predict those trades. So we're going to throw him at the Lions. But that's going to wrap up our 2022 NFL mock draft full round from 1 to 32. We thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next time with another episode of the Fantasy Birds.